we're going to start with Dr. Chitai. Dr. Chitai Marabula is a consultant psychiatrist and is affiliated with the Ministry of Health Kenya, the Psychiatric Association, that is KPA, and the city's rights. Chitai,
hi. Thank you, Rachel, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm clear. I'm hearing some hitch there with your voice, but all in all, I hope it will get better.
Okay, sorry about that. I think I'll be a bit louder. Can you hear me now? Chitai?
It's better. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for that. With us, we also have Immaculate. Immaculate is a social worker by profession, a founder and director of Speak Mind Love Foundation, a youth-led organization whose main goal is creation of awareness on mental health issues like suicide today, and a speaker on issues of identity. Immaculate Karanja, please say hi.
Thank you so much, Madam Rachel. I am Immaculate Wanjiku Karanja, social worker by profession, co-founder and director of Speak Mind Love Foundation, and I am glad to be here today working together to prevent suicide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Immaculate, and we do recognize the good work that you do. Thank you so much. With us is someone probably is well known in our media fraternity, and it's none other than our media personality.
Rachel, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, someone muted me. Sorry about that. I'm really sorry about that. So I was introducing Chao, who works with Capital FM. She's a radio presenter and artist relations manager. And most recently, she founded a really good organization called Bonga alongside her colleague, David Bonga Digital, for digital at Capital FM. And Bonga is an online platform set up to get people to open up, like we are doing right now, and to be more honest about their mental well-being. The multilinguistic media personality is also a graduate at St. Catherine's University in Minnesota and has majored in journalism and minored in French and international relations. So our dear Chao, please say hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay, all right, good. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here to represent Bonga. Like I have a co-founder and there's a whole team behind me. I'm not alone. I'm just the voice you hear for today. I'm sure it'll rotate. And of course, on behalf of Capital FM, it's like I said, it's a great honor to be here to speak up on World Suicide Prevention Day. So thank you so much to the Ministry of Health and to everybody who made this possible. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Chao. We really appreciate your presence over here. And we're going to introduce also last but not least, our dear and young Dr. Omar. Dr. Nasri Omar is a global mental health specialist and is a focal person, the Ministry of Health Systems and Services at MOH, that's the Ministry of Health Kenya. Dr. Omar, please say hi.
Hi, thank you for the introduction, Rachel, and apologies for the technical hitch we had earlier, and I hope we were able to learn a lot from this discussion. Thank you.
So thank you so much. You may always, as you post your messages, if you want any of them to address your messages directly, so just put an @ next to it. You can say @ Omar, @ Chitai, @ Immaculate, @ Chao. and they'll be happy to address any questions that they have. At least the goal of each one of us as we attend this webinar is to be in a place where you can easily, without feeling any form of discomfort, easily assess for suicide among your peers, among anyone close to you. At least by the end of the day, if you have come across 5 people, at least one should have been comfortable enough to ask whether they are thinking of ending their lives, and also be able to know how you can refer as well as how you can help in your own way to mitigate that eventuality. So to start us off, it would be good to know about how suicidal ideations, when I talk about ideations, I mean thoughts, how they come about. And it is said that we all, like all of us, each one of us, even who are here, we all have had at one point thought about suicide. And the only difference is the variation in severity. If this is so, at what point do people tip over to the other side? Dr. Chitai, probably you can help us in trying to navigate this.
Thank you, Rachel. I totally agree with you that suicidal thoughts are a common phenomenon in all people, and just like other mental health phenomenon, suicidal, such as anxiety, such as feeling sad, such as having even hallucinations, hearing voices can be normal as long as it happens in certain circumstances. It does not last long, and it does not disrupt your activities, cause you distress, and cause others distress. So even suicidal thoughts are also some of those. They are phenomenon that it's a phenomenon that occurs in people in daily life. So usually this originates from a place of pain. So without pain, there are no suicidal thoughts and there's no suicidal behavior. So it begins with pain from any source. So it can be physical pain or psychological pain. So physical pain could come from a disease of the body that causes you discomfort, like chronic back pain, like cancer, like chest pain, and so on, as long as it's pain. Now, this or psychological pain that can come from losses. So you lose your job, you lose your marriage, you lose your business, you lose things you value. It is painful. You lose a loved one. Losing something is painful, although it does not physically cause pain in your physical body, and the origin is psychological. So this pain, if it is accompanied by a sense of hopelessness, all right. So that is the origin of a suicidal thought. So from there, the person is likely now to develop suicidal thought, because human beings, one of our most important drives is to be happy, to experience happiness, enjoy life. If that is missing, and there is no opportunity of having or gaining it in future, then you start developing suicidal ideations. But then at that point, they'll not be very strong, but they can become stronger if our connectedness to others, other people, the things we love, hobbies, and so on is also weak. So you are experiencing pain, you are hopeless, but then your sense of connectedness is weak. If you compare the connectedness and the pain, the connectedness is weaker than the pain, or the pain is greater than the connectedness. So any factors around isolation will graduate the pain or the suicidal ideation from mild to strong. So that person who is not connected to much in life will have stronger ideation from there. And then that's not enough. The next step of a person attempting suicide also means that another factor is present, and that factor is capacity for suicide. So capacity for suicide can be due to three things, really. Either genetic, a person is predisposed. So the predisposition comes because of a person's, a person's capacity to experience pain. So a person who has less capacity for pain, or who can resist pain, is more predisposed to suicide, and they may contemplate. The second one is habituation, which is just a fancy word for getting used to something. So you can be habituated to either pain or fear. So if you work maybe in circumstances that expose you to pain, fear and suffering, such as a soldier who goes to a battlefield, doctors who work in hospitals, and nurses and clinical officers. You are at a greater risk because of that. And then lastly is knowledge of how to use a method that could lead to death. And that includes things like guns, things like poisons, and things like also medicines. So you can see, and if you put that in consideration, you see how certain professions are at a higher risk. People know how to use guns, people who use chemicals in the farms, and health workers who use drugs in the hospitals.
And how would gender come into play?
Yes. So and I mean, and we cannot exhaust the factors. Obviously, we.
Dr. Chitai?
We could place, yeah, I broke off there, sorry. So we could place a lot of these factors along that path of pain, hopelessness, lack of connectedness, and capacity. But probably gender could come at the level of genetics. So where the male psychology is different from the female psychology on the basis of the predominant male hormone, which is testosterone, which predisposes males to be more aggressive, probably more impulsive, and generally the social aspect of it. Again, the expectation that that if a man attempts suicide, the expectation is that they should not survive, and it's more shameful for a man to survive suicide in our society than a female. So men tend to go for more lethal methods because of these factors.
All right. Okay, so for them, it's either if they go or they don't, and it's pretty sad about it.
It's pretty sad.
So, yeah, thank you, Chitai. You've talked about mostly about symptoms of depression. I was wondering, are there other mental illnesses that predispose someone? Sorry, are there other mental illnesses that predispose someone to succumbing to suicide or having suicidal ideation as compared to depression?
Okay, so suicide as a behavior is not a mental illness on its own, although a lot of talk is going on whether this could be a standalone mental illness. There's that discussion because it appears as though it sort of tends to have a pathway of its own, such that even though a lot of the cases are related to depression, but there are also cases that are related to other mental disorders. And depression contributes a huge chunk of the cases, maybe up to 50% of the deaths by suicide, but also the other conditions that commonly will lead to suicide include bipolar, mood disorder, schizophrenia, substance use disorder, just to name a few. And eating disorders as well, they can contribute to suicidal behavior. So it's not just mental illness, it's not just depression alone. But even outside mental illnesses, there's also the aspect of impulsive suicide, where there's no identifiable mental disorder. And that is a small percentage, but also it's quite baffling sometimes to people who think that this person has been well all along. They didn't notice anything, but then they suddenly contemplated and died of suicide.
Yeah, and I think most of us have had such kind of experiences where you're with one person today, you're laughing, you're in good terms, and wake up tomorrow, something has happened, and you're wondering, how did this happen? And probably one of the reasons could be they really didn't have an identifiable mental illness, just an impulsive sort of thought that led to that, and that could have been, and mitigation could be in terms of those factors that you mentioned, in terms of knowledge of a way to commit it, to do it, lack of connectedness, fear, pain, and all those things. Thank you so much, Dr. Chitai. I think I would like to discuss more about the risk factors with the help of Dr. Omar, especially when you're facing this COVID-19 epidemic. What is the risk of suicide during a crisis like the one that we are facing right now? or any other kind of crisis that may come up? Dr. Omar.
Yeah, sorry, Rachel, I got dropped off. So,
So,
question again?
yeah, we can hear you.
Please repeat the question.
Oh, I was wondering what are the risks of suicide during a crisis? Can be the COVID-19 epidemic or any other form of crisis. We have been having gender-based violence within the homes. So what is the risk of suicide?
Okay. Thank you for that. So as we are aware, these times of COVID-19, a lot of has happened, and Dr. Chitai has mentioned some of what is going on right now. People have lost jobs, there's been loss of family and friends, and also the way we were not able to say goodbye to our loved ones, that has caused a lot of stress within the population. And also people have lost their homes, their businesses. Social interaction has been almost non-existent so far because of the physical distancing and people being told to stay at home. So this has really affected a lot of people, especially the youth. And another thing which has happened during COVID is there's a lot of stigma and discrimination for people if you're either suspected to have COVID or one of your family members has COVID or you even went into quarantine. We're also seeing that the effect of restriction of movement on people's freedom and their rights to move around. And this has really caused a lot of anxiety within the population. Our routines have all been disrupted because of COVID-19. Children are all at home, parents are also at home. And due to now the stay-at-home measures which are put in place in order to control the virus, we are seeing a lot of, as you mentioned, violence in the homes. Child abuse has also increased. Then there's also a fear of contracting COVID. So if anyone has a cough, people will not go and get tested now because people are really scared of what comes with having COVID-19 and also the stigma around it. The other thing which we are seeing is there's people who already have an existing mental condition, their situation is now worse, probably due to lack of access to services. They're not able to go to the facilities. They're also scared that they may contract COVID within the facilities. So that has brought a lot of issues. And there's also the toll on the frontline workers, including the healthcare workers. So all this precipitates people probably to have suicidal thoughts. And, the risk of suicide is higher now in crisis settings, and it has been seen that the risk is higher also in humanitarian settings. So that's something that we've witnessed. Also, there was quarantine, and we know what was going on during quarantine and how people were scared of even going into quarantine. So yeah. So that's maybe that's just a breakdown of what everything that COVID has caused. And this has led to a lot of anxiety, a lot of hopelessness, sadness. People are having difficulty sleeping. There's fatigue, irritability, and people are experiencing some psychosomatic symptoms like aches and pains, which you can't explain. So these are all contributing. In a way, the impact of COVID-19 of the mental health is way more than what we expected. And it's probably going to be even much more, even after COVID. Over to you, Rachel.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Omar. It's quite scary to know that even if COVID ends, it's going to continue. There are a lot of life crises that are coming up. Thank you for bringing the reality home and to make us well aware of how suicide can be a symptom of what is going on at the moment, especially the stresses. And as we continue listening to these, I just want to remind everyone that we are going to deal with prevention as the last bit of this. I just want us to be very much aware of what is going on, to be more conversant with what are the precursors to suicide. So thank you so much, Dr. Omar. Now, I need us to dwell on children and adolescents. We have had cases of adolescents and children are dying by suicide. And it's very important that as parents, as caregivers, we get to know at what point do I know my adolescent or my child is having suicidal thoughts. Most of the time as parents and caregivers, we can see, especially adolescents, they have started having some change in behaviors, like they're probably attention seeking, they're probably sleeping too much, they're skipping classes, they're isolating themselves. Some of these behaviors could be associated with what Dr. Chitai has just mentioned, that symptoms of depression. But where do we draw the line? Where do we know that this adolescent has suicidal ideation or thoughts, or are they just having normal milestones, accomplishment. We know that adolescents at their age, they sleep a lot, which is normal. They probably prefer just to close themselves in a room and have very loud music, which may seem like normal. So at what point do we know that we draw the line here, that this now needs help and this is not a normal thing? So I'm going to call on Immaculate, social worker, to let us know at what point, where do we draw the line? Adolescent changes versus suicidal ideations, where do we draw the line? As well as children milestones versus suicidal ideation, where do we draw the line? Immaculate, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Rachel. So it's true that children and adolescents are also affected by suicidal thoughts. And in our communities, most of the time, we may wonder, why would a child be stressed or depressed or even suicidal? But I'm sure we have all seen that it is happening, and children go through stress just like adults. And it is also true that while there are some changes that happen during adolescence, just like Rachel has mentioned, there's oversleeping, there's moodiness, all that emotional turbulence. For children, there might be tantrums. There's also a lot of sensitivity in how you address them. They are also more conscious during that time, and they might be going through low self-esteem. It's a period when their self-worth is quite fragile, and they might be thinking, no one likes me, I'm not as good as this person. So there's a lot of comparison. There's also a lot of changes in how they relate with people, depending on how comfortable they are feeling. So all of these things might lead to some behavior that we can discount and say, this is just the normal changes that come with adolescence and puberty. But there's a point in which we should be more keen, because some of the changes that might come might signify a deeper problem. An example can be maybe too much sleeping. Yes, as much as there is a lot of sleeping, sleeping in the sense that they are very withdrawn, they do not want to talk to people at all, as well as changes in appetite. That also happens, and that definitely leads to maybe gaining weight, which brings a whole set of problems as well because of being conscious and comparing yourself. There's also extreme absence from school, and maybe getting into conflicts with friends in school. There's also withdrawal. They do not want to be engaged with family members most of the time, which is something very common. For example, when the family is eating together, the adolescent doesn't want to be interacting with people in the family a lot. Sometimes there can be verbal expression of being sad, but it is not everyone who can articulate this, because it's difficult to talk about emotions. Sometimes you might not even know what emotions you are going through. But for some, they might actually verbalize it and say that I am feeling sad. Some can actually also say I am feeling suicidal, or try to act in ways in which you might now see. And some of these are preoccupation with death, or someone who died by suicide. And this can be in terms of maybe writing poems on death, or the kind of pictures they are drawing. And that is why things like art therapy is very, very important. Sometimes maybe also giving out their possessions. That might also signify something like absence in future. Another thing is talking about that absence directly, maybe asking questions like, how do you think it would be if I wasn't here? Another sign would be a decline in personal hygiene. They're not that concerned about their outlook. And another one might be high risk behavior or reckless behavior. Another one might be self-harm, which has become very common. Self-harm has become very common, and especially among girls, teenage girls. That is definitely something that signifies more than just the adolescence changes that come about. And a lot of moodiness, irritability, aggression, and anger outbursts, more than the usual. Just as I had said, sometimes these tantrums and irritability is seen, but if it becomes too much, you should be concerned about it. Again, the kind of shows that this adolescent is watching, the kind of conversations they're having with their friends may signify something. Just I had said, what they're journaling, what they're drawing, what they're writing in poems, the kind of music they are listening to, such kind of changes in behavior might signify something deeper. Yes. Back to you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Immaculate. Like you said, sometimes it's not a clear cut. According to what you have just shared, it's not sometimes very clear cut. You have to be intentional. You're trying to look out and see what your adolescent or your child is up to. And yeah, some things may seem like they are normal, but they are not. And especially in self-cutting, I think we're in a society that says self-cutting is more of an attention-seeking kind of thing. And usually say, especially for kids, if they are attention-seeking, you just let them be themselves. But then when we let them be, and then the next morning we are kind of regretting and having guilt for it, that is likely not to go over well with our own emotional or mental health. Thank you so much for that. And I think that leads us well into something else that we call survivor guilt. Like we are in a situation where we have lost our loved ones one way or the other. And it's common when you lose your loved one, especially to suicide, to feel responsible for probably not doing something to prevent that incident. And sometimes if we even did something, it might not have helped as much as we would have. And it's important to know about the ambivalence that people have when it comes to sex, especially for guys who have attempted or who have actually successfully done it. And there are stories that are shared of people saying, like, I don't want to kill myself. I just don't want to stop existing. And that ambivalence, like, is this person either suicidal or not? Probably if we get to know more about that, that can help us. And also to get to know how do we deal with having concern over not have helped enough or probably not have helped at all. So my question to Ida would be, can someone be too sick to fight off suicide intent even when help is given? We're talking more about survival guilt. Can someone be too sick to fight off suicide intent even when help is given? Ida?
Sorry, I didn't.
My question is, so we have heard people say things that I don't want to kill myself. I just want to stop existing. I don't want to live the life I'm living right now. I just want to stop existing, but I really don't want to kill myself. So that ambivalence and people coming in to help and probably not helping enough. So the question is, can someone be too sick to fight off his intention? Is someone beyond redemption? Your mic is muted, Ida.
Sorry, I was saying thank you for that question, and I'll start with the last part that is someone beyond redemption. No, we can all get help. We can all be able to go above these feelings that we are experiencing. But the question is, how do we go about, how do we even know that we can receive help? And traumatic experiences usually leave people like this. There's so many thoughts that they have. There's so many unanswered questions. And the more it keeps coming at them, the more it becomes difficult for them to be able to function in a way that is helpful to them and even to people in society. And this keeps on troubling them over and over. Sometimes people experience what they call, they've tried, they've survived, and then now there's this guilt that comes. Yeah, like, I tried this, how come I didn't die? Or someone tried this and they managed to cross over on the other side, and how come I wasn't able to stop them, and so on and so forth. So you have these survivor guilt questions really bogging you down. And there's a study that was done one time in the UK. I think this was in 2018, in a clinic sample where they were looking at a group of people, and 38.5% of those people who had been in an traumatic experience event reported having or experiencing rather this survivor guilt. And usually the symptoms that people get is the question that, why have I survived when others have not? Or what could I have done to prevent this? Or what did I not do to prevent this? And some of the symptoms that they usually experience, like what Immaculate has expressed, there's a lot of irritability, and there's anger, there's sleeping problems, they get flashbacks, they get obsessive thoughts about these experiences, and it keeps on going on and on, and sometimes it is muted to the people around them that they don't see it as a problem, so they are not even open to offering them some kind of help or support, and this keeps the cycle going over and over. So the question that we ask ourselves is, what is it that we can do, or how can we help such people? And it even becomes a bit worse for them if there's been a history of trauma in their life. And trauma usually has many faces. It could have been childhood abuse, it could have been in the home, it could have been at school, it could have been something at your workplace, and one does not know when psychologically they're trying to mix all this in there. So the person ends up having false beliefs about their role in an event or how they could have handled it. And when this happens, it becomes so distressing to them. And of course, it brings about these thoughts that people have. So there are ways of coping. And one way, and I think this could be one of the best, is by accepting that you're going through something, accepting that you're not able to handle it by yourself, and accepting that there can be help. But then the question is, how do I get help? Or where do I access a service that can help me be able to cope with this? And the good thing is in public facilities, one can always walk in and they can always talk to the clinicians and tell them this is what is going on with me, and they can always get that referral. So when you accept and you allow these feelings and you process them slowly by slowly, that's one sure way of getting help. Then another way that someone can help themselves with is to connect with others. You notice that when people are experiencing these thoughts, they tend to withdraw a lot. But if one tries to connect with others, it helps to fill in a gap. And when you share your feelings with family and friends, or sometimes loved ones just around you, then it helps you to be able to process these feelings that you're experiencing. And another way is we usually talk about self-care, whereby you do small activities just to help you cope with the everyday with the experiences that you're going through. And this could be small things like just taking a walk, enjoying the environment around you, as something as small as doing some kind of exercise. I've seen, like, for example, where I live, usually people do some jogs around. It could be just reading a book. It could be taking a bath, just simple, small things. But the most important fact is for those of us who are around someone who has experienced a loss of a loved one by suicide or through any other traumatic event, it's also important for us to be on the lookout. I'm not saying that one is always on alert, like you're going on a prowl, like let's try and see who is not looking the way they usually are, but just being on the lookout and being there for that person that you call a friend, that you call a sister, a brother, even a colleague, and noticing shifts in their emotions and in the way they handle themselves and asking questions. It could be one way that you'd be saving a life. We need to be connected more with the people around us. And I think that if we do these small but very important things, to ourselves and to the people around us, that it can help people be able to cope with this guilt that they may be experiencing and these feelings of hopelessness or sadness that they could be experiencing. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Ida. That I just realized that was a double-barreled question, and you handled it very well. I would like to hear what you can weigh in, say, share your remarks.
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that this is I'm really learning a lot. It's, you know, when you're in the media, you're always on the receiving end, and you hear it from a very clinical perspective. But right now, the breakdown is enabling us, is enabling me, for example, to understand. Just in regards to the survivor guilt, I think from the media's perspective, what would really, really help us is if we avoided language that sensationalizes or normalizes suicide or presents it as a solution to problems. And I think that's in tandem to what the medical fraternity are doing. So on our end is just, you know, to avoid that sort of language and avoiding explicit description of the method. Because if somebody has survived and you hear this is, you know, you hear explicitly what somebody did and, you know, and went through with it, it could trigger, you know, maybe wanting to repeat. I'm not the expert here, but I'm speaking from a perspective of the media. And, you know, and right now what we have is we have a traditional media and we have, you know, digital media, social media. That's how we're having this conversation. So social media, you know, I think we need to encourage ourselves and we need to work together with other stakeholders to ensure that we're not using photos, we're not using video footage to post this, because it's you know, it's sensational. It's like a flash in the pan when you have an egg. Allow me to use imagery because that's what I am. I create a lot. So if I have an egg and it's a hot pan and there's a hot oil and I just put it in, you see the flash in it, or you hear the oil bubbling and all of that. And that's what we see or we feel when we see these images or the video or the descriptions in media. So if we could work together to sort of have a method where we educate and stop the sensationalizing, so that we help the people who have survived. We help the people who are here, and you know, and you can use the medical terminology for that, but you know, we just avoid putting it out there and making it big, this huge thing. We can counteract it by ensuring we educate. You know, it's like football. You can't attack all the time. You got to do defense and you got to counterattack. So you've got to use creative ways in which to ensure that we don't sensationalize or normalize suicide, especially for people who have survived. And I see it on social media. We see it on social media all the time. All the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. And I think something that is sobering, somewhat sobering to that is that out of every one completed suicide, there are other 20 attempts. So you can imagine the impact of just reporting one case on other people. Like, does that kind of reporting encourage the people who are alive to seek help, or does it just deter it? So thank you for weighing that in, and we're going to talk more about prevention. And right now we are jumping into prevention measures, and I want us to take us in more details. I want us to know how we can prevent suicide as individuals, then what the government is doing about it, and how the media actors, like how you said, how they can come about and help with this prevention. And what I want us to know is that each of us in our little capacities, we can be able to weigh in on this matter and help in whatever, in the little way that you can. It can be within just our families, because there is a probability if a healthcare worker can come alongside 5 people and one of them has suicidal ideations, then there is that likelihood also within the home. So how can we do that? So I'm going to ask Immaculate to help us in this. And I want us to be more practical when we talk about prevention, just not saying what people can do, but saying how they can do it. So Immaculate, give me examples of unhelpful versus helpful messages. How would someone intending to take their own life perceive the message that you give? I need us to understand what happens when someone says that you can, someone on social media can post that today I didn't feel like waking up. I just saw the light and I just thought I don't want to exist anymore. Then someone can respond and say like, oh, you're so pretty to think of death. Why can't you? Why can someone so pretty think of death? So is that a help or a helpful message? So, and how would that person perceive it? So Immaculate, take us through.
Okay. Thank you so much for that question. It's true that how we respond to someone who is suicidal really does matter, because yes, you might be doing it from a point of wanting to help this person, but how you give the message and what you say is very, very important, because this is a very sensitive situation. This person is already at a very bad place. So you need to be very careful about what you say and how you say it. For example, some of the unhelpful messages that we have out there is maybe someone telling you, maybe you've told them that you're suicidal, and so their response would be, just snap out of it, or it will get better, or it is all in your mind, or things are actually not that bad, or things could be so much worse, depending on the situation that you're going through. So to this person, this situation is a very overwhelming situation. Emotionally, they are very low because of it. So when you give such kind of responses that this things could be even worse than this, or this is not even a big problem, what you're doing is you are minimizing their pain. You are not feeling and understanding that this person is actually affected by this situation. And what they need is empathy. They need you to understand that this is weighing down on them and help them. Other comments that we have out there is you are always thinking so many negative things, or no one ever said that life was fair, such kind of comments. And just as I've said, what this does is it takes away the pain, it takes away the kind of help that this person will be receiving, because they're already seeing that you cannot understand that this is a very complex situation for them. That means they have even blocked the helpful messages that would actually help. So those are some of the unhelpful messages, and maybe some of the things that we can do instead. And some of the message that we can say is, I want to be here for you. Sometimes you might not even understand what this person is going through. And that's another common mistake we make. We always say, I understand where you're coming from. I understand what you're going through. But truth be said, especially if you haven't gone through suicidal thoughts, or even if you have gone through suicidal thoughts, people's situations are very different. Saying you understand what they're going through, therefore, is not appropriate in that sense. So, what you can tell them instead is, I'd like to be here for you. I'd like to walk with you through this journey. I want to support you. You can even say, tell me how I can support you, because most of the time you might be at a loss and wonder, what exactly should I do in this kind of situation? So you could ask them to give you their options of how exactly, if what exactly is comfortable for them that you can do, because we might take steps to try and help, maybe even talk to their family and parents and their partners. Maybe that is not what they wanted, so it coming from them is very, very important. But basically the most important thing is just reminding them that you are there for them, reminding them that you want to walk with them through the journey, reminding them that you want to support them. And sometimes this can get tiring, especially if it is a very long process of recovery. But something that I always like to share is, let's be there and be there relentlessly, such that you will keep on checking in, you'll keep on encouraging them, even when it gets tiring. So those are some of the helpful messages that you can use.
Thank you so much, Immaculate. And I think for all of us, we can tie everything in from what Dr. Chitai talked about how people feel pain, they feel it's like a black hole, they are struggling with all these. Then apparently, and there's some of the things that mediate eventual dying by suicide, the things that are like connectedness. And if you ask just this question, like, I want to be there for you, how can I help you? Then that ties in connectedness, which means it ties in something that can moderate that particular eventuality. And that's how you help. It's as simple as that. And it's something that any of us can do and any of us can help. And Immaculate, I just want to ask that. So you have told us exactly how we should ask the right questions and how people feel when we ask the wrong questions. But then, which questions should we bring in to try and assess? There's some people who post on social media that today they didn't feel like existing anymore. So I have 5 people around me, and among them maybe one is suicidal. So how can I find out?
Okay. Thank you so much. So on the question on what questions to ask, let me start by saying that sometimes we are very afraid of going direct to the point. And especially if it is someone who has posted or told you that they are suicidal, we are normally very afraid of asking directly about suicidal ideations, suicidal plans. So that's the first thing that I'd like to say, that it is always best to ask directly. The reason is most of the people are normally going around the bush asking, all the other questions apart from that one. And this person is not feeling comfortable to talk about it, so they'll not bring it up. So at the end of the day, the issue is not addressed. So what you should do is ask directly. And some of the questions that you can ask, especially to someone you really feel is suicidal, is you need to be very sensitive about it first, because this is not something that you just can casually talk about like all the other conversations. So first you need to get a calm environment, get a way to talk about it very sensitively, and be very careful to also not say the unhelpful messages that you've just mentioned. And I forgot to mention one that is very common, that suicide is very selfish, that have you thought about your kids, the people you're going to leave.
Apparently you're better off than someone with cancer,
So be very careful not to give these kind of messages. Instead, among the questions that you can ask is, what exactly do you mean by you do not feel like living anymore? What exactly do you mean by you'd like to die? Another question is, have you ever thought of, or have you been thinking about taking your life by suicide? If they say yes, depending on the answers they give to these questions, you can now know how to progress with that conversation. Another question that, again, we might fear is asking about a suicidal plan. Depending on the conversation and you feel that this person is really at risk, another question you can ask is, have you come up with a plan already of how or when you can go about this, activity? And maybe the person can say, no, I haven't thought about it. Or they can say, yes, I have thought about the means that I'm going to use. I have already procured the items. I already have a date and time. The reason why I'm saying this is because most of the time, or sometimes, let me say sometimes, because just as you had said, suicide can be impulsive. But other times, it is something that someone has been thinking about for a very long time. So they might have had enough time to even come up with a whole plan about, and very detailed about when, how, what items. They even have an idea of when people are not around. So this is the best time. So that's why we should not be afraid to ask that question. And definitely if the person says yes, that means that it is a little bit more serious, and you should not leave them alone. You should make sure that their access to anything that they use to harm themselves is, you remove any lethal items from the house, and definitely try now to be more proactive about getting them help. Depending on the situation, you can see who you can contact, whether it's their maybe parent or a close friend, or you can help them book an appointment with a counselor. So these are some of the questions that you can ask to get direct to the point.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Immaculate. I think for those of us who have listened to that, especially how I can help someone, now you already have tips, and I'm glad we have exhausted that particular objective for this webinar. Now, I want us to jump to bigger bodies, that is the government and the media actors in terms of prevention. So, Dr. Omar, we have heard that globally 1 in 5 people who have died through suicide have had contact with a health professional. And this highlights the underutilization of government institutions such as hospitals as suicide prevention sites. But then again, probably the government is doing something, maybe to curb this curve, to flatten this curve, or not only in hospitals, but in other institutions. Please let us know whether the government is doing something to either flatten this curve or to prevent suicide in other institutions.
Thank you, Rachel, for that question. So as you said, yeah, studies have shown that there's underutilization of especially primary health care. And that's why we are developing now a national suicide prevention strategy. And we've actually developed our draft 0 is ready. And the plan is to have the strategy ready by the end of the year. And the strategy will be the tool which we are going to use to disseminate on suicide prevention across all public health facilities, private, and that will be with the help of CSOs, NGOs, community leaders, so that people can understand, because there's also lack of knowledge on how to prevent suicide. So we also need to build the capacity of the healthcare workers and other essential workers, including the gatekeepers, in this case, even teachers, on how to prevent suicide. And because the strategy has to be, we are planning to also appoint, this is happening right now, the appointment of members of a technical working group, which is going to develop the strategy. The 0 draft is already in place, but we also need a multidisciplinary team now to finalize the strategy and make sure all partners and all stakeholders are represented. So here we're going to work with NGOs, CSOs, service user groups, that is people with lived experience, who are very vital in this, and also the Justice Department. As we know, suicidal attempts is criminalized in Kenya. So we need to get all the players on board, and also associations, healthcare associations and teachers, Ministry of Education also. So on this also, we're also following the recommendations by the Task Force on Mental Health, especially on the issue of criminalization of suicide, decriminalization of suicide. That is one of the recommendations which was made by the Task Force on Mental Health. And they asked for an amendment, actually, for Section 226 of the Penal Code, which says that a suicidal attempt is a misdemeanor. And so we also need to also remove this. We want people to come and seek the services and not be arrested once they come and seek those services. The other thing that we are also working on, which the plans are underway for that, is we want to set up a national suicide prevention lifeline. Currently, we don't have one in place. So we already have sorry?
Yeah, go ahead. It's true, we don't have one. Yeah.
So it's going to be a toll-free number, which is going to be free of charge for everyone. And it will run 24 hours, 7 days a week. And a number has already been assigned to the ministry for that purpose. And psychologists have been identified who are going to man the line. We're just finalizing on the final steps and make it on the SOPs to have the line functioning very soon. This line will not only be suicide prevention lifeline, it will also serve as a national mental health lifeline, a telemental health, whereby we can even have psychiatrists, because as you know, we don't have enough and we'll never have enough human resources for mental health. No country has enough, as we can say, especially in low and middle income countries. So we are trying to use telemedicine to be able to provide psychiatric reviews and consultations over the phone for people in settings where they can't get a psychiatrist. And so that line will be manned also by psychiatrists. And the other thing is that now on the psychologists, maybe one thing which COVID has really, I think COVID for us created an opportunity for us to get psychologists to be put in public service. So COVID presented that opportunity because, as all my fellow panelists have said, there's a lot of psychological distress and people need to speak to, there's need for psychologists, there's need for therapy. And we didn't have any of them in public service before. So for the first time, Public Service Commission has hired 114 psychologists. And that's a big step for us. That may seem very small, but for us, it's a major step because that has never happened. And we were having, out of the 114, every county has been allocated 2 psychologists. And the other remaining 20 are going to be at national level. And this is to build also the capacity for the county mental health teams, so that we can start setting up county mental health teams. So that they will also remove this over-reliance on the national referral hospitals like Mathare Hospital. So we build the capacity of the people, of the healthcare workers on the ground to be able to support people who are having suicidal ideation, people who've attempted suicide, and also provide the necessary mental health support. So something else that we are also working on is starting, as Chao said, is we are going to start media training on suicide reporting. There are guidelines which have already been developed by WHO. We're just going to adapt them to our setting. It's also part of our national suicide prevention strategy. As Chao has said also clearly, is that media reporting really affects the way suicide is perceived. And also it can also encourage copycats. So there's a lot, and also it increases the stigma towards the people who probably attempted the suicidal attempt. So there's a lot of training required for media, which we are planning on doing. And part of the efforts that we are making to like enhance the capacity of the staff is that we've already started setting up county mental health teams. In every county, we already identified the focal persons for mental health in every county. And as I said, COVID has also presented us with that opportunity because everyone clearly sees with COVID, the mental health impact on the population. Even the president talked about it in the COVID conference. And he talked about why there is a need for us to have a plan for mental health and to start safeguarding the mental health of the population. So for us, setting up the county mental health teams is very important. And we are being supported here by the Council of Governors. And this will also enable now the primary healthcare facilities, which people will visit. People will not come, if you're having a suicidal ideation, you won't come to Mathare Hospital. You'll go to the nearest healthcare center close to you because studies have shown they come and visit the primary healthcare centers actually to seek for help and support, but they don't get it. So that is our main reason why we need to build the capacity from community level as well. And speaking of community level, we are planning on training the 60,000 community health volunteers in Kenya. That we are working with the community department and NGOs. And we're working on also training them to offer some form of basic intervention, some form of brief intervention like psychological first aid, something very short that they can provide at community level. So, sorry, I'm speaking too much. So let me just continue and just explain also. We're also working on the recommendations by the Task Force on Mental Health. One other recommendation, which is a very major recommendation, is to declare mental illness a national emergency. If this is done, because suicide, we are seeing, is that suicide is not a standalone. It's affected, as Dr. Chitai said, by different mental health condition or symptoms. It's just a symptom. So we need to also work on the mental health of the population. And if mental illness is declared a national emergency, this means also that funding will be increased for mental health. The same way HIV was declared a national emergency in the 90s. The other thing that the task force has also recommended, they made very strong recommendations which are really needed at this point that we need to address and we need to adapt as a country, is also they said financing of mental health should be in line with international standards. And that is something that we're working really hard, and we need a lot of advocacy towards that as well. The other thing is also decentralizing mental health services so that we don't have the 14 mental health units in the country that everyone is going there and no one has mental health services close to them or near their primary healthcare center next to them. And they also recommended setting up a national mental health and happiness commission, which I think, honestly, I think it's a brilliant idea because you're able to monitor the state of mental health of the population. There's a recommendation there as well of having a happiness index. You see, these are very bold things that we want to do. So these are just the things which we are working towards to ensure the mental health and well-being of Kenyans are protected. And in the long run, also we are able to save the valuable lives that we are losing to suicide. And I think that's it. Over to you, Rachel. Sorry.
Thank you, Nasri, and I think that's very creative, especially what you are doing like right now. I know for the government, most people wanasema they say they don't do, but the fact that there's an online platform coming where people can seek mental health platform, that's very creative. That takes care of the underutilization of the institutions that are there, and it's also very creative in that it takes into account the low numbers of mental health service providers that we have in the country. So, so that we keep the government on account, when is the hotline likely to be up and running?
Thank you for that, Rachel. So we are actually, I can't give definitive dates, but I can say that we already have the line is already toll free. Now we are working on making it also be available, not just at, I don't know if this makes sense. We have written a proposal whereby we'll have the line also functioning, having a line in every public health facility. If someone calls me maybe from Migori and they're having a suicidal attempt, the line can be linked to another healthcare worker in Migori who can go and respond. Because I'm in Nairobi, I'll not be able to respond. So we are planning to, this is very ambitious, but first we'll have the line, the national line, and then we're going to now work on having mental health lines in all public health facilities. So I don't have a definitive date because it needs there's a lot of work around it because it's going to be a national line, and also the human resource capacity that we require to run the line is also something right now we are discussing. And it's going to be soon. We keep our fingers crossed. So we are hoping it's going to come very soon. We're just finalizing on the last touches and we're going to launch it very soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Omar, and we are very grateful for that. And thank you for informing us of what the government is doing. Some of us can only know through these platforms, and we are very grateful for that. To close this session off, I want to see what the media actors have done. So, Chao, like we have discussed a bit earlier, we have highlighted how the media might be glorifying suicide, and that for every suicide that is reported, or every successful suicide, there are 20 more attempted ones that have gone on. So stigma has been highlighted as one of the reasons why people with suicidal ideations are less likely to seek help, and it's mostly felt by survivors of suicide attempt. So how can the media and other actors remedy this problem when reporting on suicide incidences? Chao.
All right, thank you so much. I feel like I'm in class and I'm graduating soon, like at the end of this webinar. Honestly, it is. It's so encouraging to hear what the government has planned and all the actors have planned. And Dr. Omar, you just talked about the training. So when this question came in prior to the webinar, like I said, Bonga is a team, and I spoke to my co-founder Muba, and he is so like he was like, look, you got to say this, and I just want to read out because you talked about training journalists, but the thing is, his thing is they need general training plus not just training, but understanding on mental health. Because his feeling is you can train the journalists, but if they don't understand the basics, remember I just said I feel like I'm in class right now. So there's some things that I personally am going to change in the way I speak or interact with people based on this conversation. And that's just part of the, not just training, that's just general understanding. So, and how this helps is that it helps the person on the other end, whether it's a journalist. Remember, we talked about social media right now is all over the place. So it could be a blogger. It could be somebody on, using their IG profile. It could be somebody on radio, a personality like myself, to sensitively speak or report. And I think the key word I've picked up from you is sensitivity and empathy. And this is what he said. It should come in handy because at the end of every report or at the end of every story, if I'm putting up a vlog, if I'm doing something using digital media, I can be sensitive and it'll show in what I have put together. I don't know if this is clear. so that I retain my objectivity as a journalist or as a media person, but I still am able to practice empathy. But that can only come when there is not just the training, but understanding. So this is like a twinfold, and like I said, I'm really happy to hear what the government is planning on doing, and maybe this can also be added. You're the experts. We're the ones who are learning. Like I said, I've learned so much. Also, it's important for us. He said to stop writing or highlighting suicide-related stories to generate web traffic. That's got to come to an end, and hopefully that'll be part of the training. That should be part of the training, and it should be more as an educational tool. So we're working together in tandem. Once again, what the government is planning on doing, you have the people on this end who are the media who disseminate, because we cannot be a vacuum. But we'll disseminate with empathy, with sensitivity, and with education that comes from your end, you see? So that way we work together. And my response, just to further add on to this, is to encourage more active and healthy dialogue and discussions about mental health related issues, about suicide, by reporting on it, talking actively with public figures and specialists in the field. So not just the public figures, but just the balance of the two. And personally, I feel like it helps to desensitize. Once again, I've seen what we've been able to do with Bonga when we've had people who are like, this person could talk about mental health. Are you serious? I would never have imagined, which I think is what Immaculate was saying earlier, where you would never imagine somebody speaking up on it. But once you have the twin combination in the media and visible or audible for people, I feel like this is definitely going to break down the stigma and reduce, the guilt and all of that. And finally, I think that, the campaigns that Dr. Omar has talked about, you said government bodies, NGOs, and other players should come into play, and encouraging engagement again from the public. Because if the public is involved, like I said, I'm not an expert, so I'm like a public right now. But once you hear like the common or the Mwananchi's feeling on something that's happening, you're able to pair what it is you're doing very ably with what is on the ground. Like they say, vitu kwa ground be different. So you can have one thing at the top and then kwa ground to be different. So when you come together and you have that middle ground, I believe that this is definitely going to be seamless, and it'll be in tandem. It's baby steps, but it's one step at a time and one step going forward. You definitely need all actors. You definitely need all players. And I believe the media is going to be very, very excited to be a part of this. I could tell you, just sitting from where I'm at right now, sitting from the seat of my co-founder, who's like a much bigger player in the media, because he's both traditional and digital media. When you have the two players or all the players coming together, you're able to push it further. Allow me to use football, because I love Barcelona, but they're doing really badly right now. But when they were at their peak, you would see the way, Messi would get the ball, or who would get the ball. And when you play together, you have a perfect goal, you have a perfect score. And I think that this is what's going to happen. Yeah, I hope that's clear.
No, it is. And it's really nice to know that the media is well aware of what is happening, what happens with every report on suicide, and that yes, they would like to continue with their work, but they'd like to continue in a work that is preventative, in a way that encourages empathy rather than works against them. So it's not just about the numbers. And if the government can come in and involve you in a way that you accomplish this goal, then why not? And I'm glad Omar is here to listen to that. And I'm hoping Omar and other, I think I saw the director, Ministry of Health here, Dr. Kahonge. So they have heard you, and they hope they can reach out and do this. It would be really nice, because once you two big bodies work together, as the people on the ground will actually feel the impact. And venye mambo kwa chini ni different, itakuwa ni the same na yenye iko juu. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to go over to the questions that people attending have asked today. And some of the questions have already been addressed, like if a person seems troubled, is it safe to ask if they are thinking about hurting themselves? Can asking increase the danger of suicide? And that one Immaculate has already addressed and has said that there is no danger in increasing suicide. Like it's actually good to ask. And she has also shared some questions in which you can ask someone if you're worried about their mental health. Now, just one additional question that probably I'll direct to Immaculate is, one of our attendees has asked, what are the valid tools available in the public domain to measure suicidal ideation? So Immaculate, you've talked about questions. How about validated tools? Are there? Your mic is muted, Immaculate.
Pardon, please pardon the question.
So one of our attendees is asking whether there are tools for measuring suicidal ideation and validated tools as such in the public domain.
Unfortunately, I don't think I have that information as at now. Maybe we can ask the other panelists.
Dr. Chitai?
Yes, Rachel. The thing, this is a great discussion so far.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one thing I like advising my clients when working in the hospital is to appreciate the roles of different people in their wellness. Like they have a role to play themselves. Their family has a role. The psychiatrist has a role. The psychologist has a role. A psychiatric nurse will have a role. An occupational therapist may have a role in their wellness. So it's very important to recognize the role so that we don't put roles that someone may not be able to effectively play. And this is something we just want. And we professionals, for example, we may have a lot of information, but it may not be possible to transfer our roles fully to the individual patient. And we may not want to burden them with roles that we can play effectively. So, for example, when it comes to actual assessment of suicidal risk, that is a role that I would rather leave to the professional at the hospital level, so that we are not putting it on the individual. Let us lighten the burden, that if you see this, you can be able to come, listen, so that we are not turning family members into psychologists. However, one effective tool out there that we would use in the hospital, and I'm not saying it so that someone can pick it and start assessing themselves, but there's the hopelessness scale, the Beck's hopelessness scale, which has 10 items. I think it has, it's 20 items. And if your score is above 15, it shows higher severity of suicide, a higher risk of suicide. That is one of the common tools that is used. But we have others that a health worker could choose to use, and it's not always that the health worker uses a tool. Sometimes they just use their clinical skills by taking the history and just looking at the factors around your life.
Thank you, Chitai. Thank you so much for that. I also the disclaimer and sharing the tool. Naomi, you seem to be having something to say. Ida,
yeah, I just wanted to add my voice on that question, where whether there are tools that people can use. And I'll agree with Chitai that we don't want to turn people who are not professionals into psychologists or even medical social workers. But for that purpose, those of us who are the professionals, there's a variety of tools we use. And one of them I can say, which is also available online, is the ASQ. It's an suicide screen that asks about 5 questions, and it helps the person who's asking these questions to be able to categorize the client in front of them. Where do they lie? Because we've seen that in most psychiatric conditions, you'd find there's the mild, there's the moderate, and then there's the severe. And usually this questionnaire, what follows is there's another one that's a brief suicide screening assessment that, depending on how someone has answered of the 5 questions, I think it's question 4 and 5, depending on how they've answered, you'd be able to categorize the severity, which helps you to be able to plan how fast do you need to respond. because there's someone who's right at the brink of it, and you need to find the resources around you. So if I'm in, let's say, Mathare Hospital, and someone is calling me from Kangemi, and the way they've answered these questions means something needs to be done right away. So it helps me be able to know, should I reach, like we are speaking with the person, I'm asking these questions, but on the side, am I also contacting someone at Kangemi Health Center or some facility nearby, so that they can be able to respond to the person? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ida. And it's always good to give those disclaimers that the two of you have said, because otherwise, it's like how unaambiwa dawa ya kichwa ni headaches, and you run to get a headache, and you probably may be having a very bad migraine that needs to be checked before you can take any form of medication. So thank you so much for that. Now, there's someone or some few people who are trying to rationalize suicide over here. They're trying to find something to rationalize. So it's like one person, probably Dr. Chitai, you can answer this, is asking, if a person who was depressed and suicidal suddenly seems to feel better, does this mean they are no longer at risk of suicide? And also to tie that in is someone else asking, does suicide happen fast and usually as a result of one sudden traumatic event, so that it is hard to prevent? Or is suicide related, that is, the suicide related to impulsiveness? Is there a thing like rational suicide? Those are two questions that can be tied in together. And I think you can think of probably if suicide, you have said, is related to loss. So if someone probably wakes up this morning, goes to their shop and finds that it has been stolen, like everything has gone, especially during this corona period, is the next thing that person is going to commit suicide? I mean, to try and find ways to end their lives? How about you, Dr. Chitai?
Yeah, so I would say that suicide itself is a process, it's a long process in most cases, so that someone will go through mild ideation, and then the ideation could get strong or could get strong. So it's like you can put it on a spectrum from very mild ideation to strong. And at some point, if they get an intervention, that could be arrested along the way. And so basically, I think that's how we should be able to look at it. The myth out there sometimes is that that a person who has suicidal thoughts will always have them, and that's not true. So they can get to a point where that is no longer there. They no longer experience those ideas, and even if they have attempted before, they will not necessarily attempt again. There are people who attempt only once, and it's because of the situation they were in. So that is, you know, what we should say. And of course, the rationale of suicide is a philosophical topic that maybe you can organize a webinar on its own to discuss whether suicide can ever be rational in certain situations, considering the individual. You know, can it ever be said that suicide can be rational, considering that sometimes it's done under an irrational mind because of an illness? And would you say that there can be a point where it is rational? Actually, it's a discussion that can be very interesting. Omar, maybe we should organize a webinar for that.
Okay, thank you, Chitai, and I think Omar has had that suggestion, and you've actually started off that conversation very well by giving some things that may moderate or mediate that particular eventuality or that particular train of thought. So I just want to thank you all for participating in this session. Probably I'll give each panelist just like a minute or less to just have some final remarks on this conversation. We'll start with Charles.
Really, I'm just grateful to have been able to participate in this conversation. It was very educational, and I'm very excited about the fact that, you know, there seems to be there's hope that we're gonna come together and work together to achieve a common goal. And that from where I'm sitting right now is it's great. It's good. It's been a long time, because a lot of times, you know, maybe we've been thinking we know what we're doing. Like I said, we're not experts. So, but when you have the experts who hold your hands, then it's it's a much better thing to have happen. A much better thing to have happen. It couldn't come at a better time. So thank you for this opportunity once again on behalf of our team. Really grateful to the Ministry of Health for holding our hand as well. And for the future partnerships, very excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I think we have highlighted and aligned that particular last statement. Thank you so much. Ida? Your mic is off.
Yeah, I'd also like to say thank you first to the participants and then also to the panelists, and just remind everyone, all of us, that suicide is real, but there's something that we can always do to try and help someone. So we need to go back and search ourselves, our inner selves, and when we do that, we can be able to help the next person.
Thank you so much, Ida. Immaculate.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. I'm really glad. So what I'd like to share is, let us be more keen on, not only to what people are saying, but to behavior, to those unsaid words. Because unfortunately, in our culture, when you ask someone how they're doing, the first response is, "I'm fine." But we do not really know if they're fine. So let's be more keen. Let us try to reach out more, and let us try to, just be in touch with people so that we know how they are doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Immaculate. We are very grateful for you. Chitai? Your mic is off.
Yes, so I'm also quite grateful for the opportunity to participate in this. I'm grateful to those who are able to make it. To my panelists, I've learned so much from you, from this discussion. And Rachel, you've been an incredible host as well to us. And this is the first time I'm participating in a webinar that you are hosting. And you are able, I think you can even make an MC in the coming days. Now,
I hope all government spokesmen have had that.
now my last comment is that as individuals who have come to this webinar and those who will hear it later, let us take responsibility for the things that we usually attribute to other people, such as society. We must know that we are that society, such as government. We must also question to what extent are we government, or to what extent are we responsible for what government does, and take up our role even in advocacy, and even reading documents that come out of government, such as the recently released Mental Health Task Force report. Let us not just dismiss it without even reading it. It's an incredible report, just for instance. So we are also part of government, or responsible for part of what government does. And lastly, when you talk about media, to what extent are we media? We could also be media, because at this moment, everyone with a social media account is a media practitioner. So when you even say that, okay, let's have some rules for suicide prevention for media, we are also media. So thank you very much. And my message is that let us take responsibility for our actions.
Thank you. Thank you. I think all of us at the end of this will be responsible media actors on our social media sites, wherever we are. Thank you so much, Dr. Chitai. And you're going to end with Omar. The last word always lies with the president. So how about someone from the government?
Thank you, Rachel, for moderating today. Sorry for the hiccup. We are very grateful that you're able to stick around for this long. And it has been such an engaging discussion. We've learned so much stuff which we didn't even know. Immaculate, you've really showed us what adolescents go through and how we should talk to them. I think it's something even upon ourselves. We are all supposed to take lessons from this on how we even engage with different people. And Chow, thank you also for telling us that you don't only need training. We need to sit together and come up with advocacy measures and get champions. That's what I had, to make the messages more sensitive and people to understand what mental health is all about. So Titai, thank you for being here for us and also sharing what it means to have, what mental health is all about and what suicide is about. And it's not just something which can fit into a box, that you can put it in a box. Naomi, thank you as well for explaining to us so well what survivor guilt is. And we really appreciate Rachel for coming through today. And you are really an excellent moderator. We really appreciate you doing this. And we'll call you again, please. Usi, don't block our numbers. We'll look for you. And what I can just say maybe finally is that mental health is dynamic, as we've all seen. It needs a multidisciplinary approach. One size cannot fit all. So we need to all work together. And that is so much in line with the theme for this year's suicide prevention. We need to work together, all of us, in order to prevent suicide. And we all welcome you to come on board and help us through this and come up with an excellent document at the end of the day, a national suicide prevention strategy for Kenya. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you so much for all of you. And I'm glad people have learned a lot. And I think to end us all, I would like us to follow that link that I've just posted as panelists and watch the video that has just been shared through the Ministry of Health. It's nice to tie in what we've just discussed to a real life story of what is going on, of how people feel. And it's nice to tap into the feelings and know what people go through and how something that may seem as good and as obvious and also something to be admired, like going to Mount Longonot and taking a hike, can as well be a suicidal journey for some people that we are going with. So it's a very sobering video, and it's a video that you can relate to that we have learned over here. So I want to thank you all for coming on board, and I wish you all the best. So just make it a point by the end of today, among the 5 people that you associate with, at least one, using the questions that Immaculate has just shared with us, try and find out whether they are having suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts. So thank you all, and to have a lovely day, and together let's work to prevent suicide. Thank you.
Thanks, guys, and bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.